All right. Sorry about that. I had some problems getting a live stream.
Sorry about that.
started.
I had some problems getting. All right.
Live stream.
Sorry about that. I had some problems getting. All right.
Live stream.
Sorry about that.
There. All right. Let me know when you're here. I've got a couple topics that I'm going to cover first, but feel free to shoot questions at me as I go, and then at some point I'll it won't take me long to get through the points I want to make, and then just go ahead and ask. I'll get to the questions once I get through all the main points. So I'm going to go through. I've got them on my handy dandy whiteboard, which when I went back to watch the last live stream, I realized that it is not a mirror image on the camera, and everything is where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to start with citations and links versus links. As people start to find research and find sources, make sure that you understand that a link is not the citation ever. The other thing to keep in mind is the citation. I'm going to move this closer to me. The citation link, there's always going to be one, but it never actually takes you back to the original source when you use the databases. So if you log into LCC's library and you find an article using a database, the link does not take you back to that original article. If you want to find that article, you actually have to use a title search, and you have to go back to the database you originally used. You can find it, but the link is not going to take you there. So that's one of the big things that students struggle with every semester. It's frustrating, but there it is nonetheless. So don't use the link. The databases, if you watch my video, and I don't know how good the sound was on that because it should have been okay, but the subtitling was way off, so I'm kind of concerned. I could understand it, but I'm used to listening to myself talk. So, but if you use the databases, it's really easy to find the citation. Make sure you can access the databases, and make sure that you get the citation and that you have some way of getting back to that article. The best thing to do is download it as a PDF. The citation will be at the bottom of the page somewhere. So that's a big help. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the essay structure of the structure of essay 4. Hi, Maisie. Thanks for coming. Hey, how you doing? It's like everybody in my face-to-face class is showing up. That's great. You guys are going to probably hear a few things twice, so that's all right, though. So I'm on the essay 4 structure. So in my face-to-face class tomorrow, the 3 of you are going to work on your annotated bibliography, which is really, I call it a source evaluation because it's a little less formal, but needless to say, we'll go through your sources, we'll kind of vet out the bad ones, and we'll find out what you have. And then we're going to start thinking about how you're going to turn this into a paper. And this paper was meant, students really struggle with research papers, and I totally get why. It's hard. What I tried to do with this paper is create a research process. So you'd do the research, and then you could kind of easily organize the research in a meaningful way. And so the research, the structure of the paper is introduction, and then basically presenting evidence from all all evidence or all research that you think is important to making a decision about whether or not we should eat or drink this thing that you're researching. That's what your paper is going to be about. That's what you focus on. And so you just sort of take it topic by topic, and so one paragraph maybe covers conditions for workers. One or two paragraphs might cover, like, if you're researching strawberries or really any food product at all, glyphosates, glyphosates. I don't know. I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's believed to be a cancer-causing chemical in lots of herbicides. Or I guess no, actually they're pesticides. But it's very commonly used, and it might cause cancer and blah blah blah. So you devote maybe a paragraph or two to the effects of that. And then you might have a paragraph that talks about, like, all the pluses of having, like strawberries, for instance, available year round. Okay, so they have, like, they're high in nutrition, and you can use hybrids that are more pest resistant. You don't have to use as much of the spray, and blah blah blah. And so you go back and forth, but the structure is kind of it's about structuring it around topics or like points, elements of the discussion, rather than like a topic sentence and then make supporting that point. You're kind of more like exploring the different elements that we need to consider in order to answer the question of should I or should I not eat this. And then the conclusion, believe it or not, is where your thesis often ends up. And that is actually a kind of a simple approach. It's going to be a lot like essay 3, where you're trying to make sense of everything in the thesis. All right, I'm sorry, in the conclusion. But the thesis is the answer to the question, should I eat this or drink this? And so you don't really make that decision like until the end. I mean, you make it well in advance, obviously, but as far as your reader is concerned, that's a conclusion that you reach only after you go through all the evidence. Like, that's how you're presenting it. It may not be what you really think. That's okay. But presenting it at the end kind of creates the element of reliability. Like, you're an unbiased purveyor of truth, and you've only reached this conclusion by having this really in-depth discussion on all factors that should be considered when eating a strawberry or a tomato or a steak or whatever it happens to be. So that is that. So that's the essay structure. It's going to be really simple. We're going to go through outlines, and online students have started using it, and it's worked pretty well. But like I said before, the most important thing is the research. And here comes my son. He's probably going to interrupt me in a second here. How many sources? There he is. How many sources? Anywhere from 4 to 10. And it depends on, I mean, there's just so many things to consider. I'm not going to give you a set number because it would be arbitrary. Yeah, have 10 or have 6 or have 3. You like, if you have 2 or 3 really good sources, that can make all the difference in the world. If you have 10 decent sources, but you need 10 to flesh out the paper, then you have 10. I don't know. I would rather you look at what you have and say, wow, I don't have enough, or, oh, I have too much. What often happens is when you do research, they don't tell you this like when the library gives you the tutorial, they never talk about this, but when you get an article, you want to look at the word count. Like, articles under 500 words are often not very useful. Articles over 500 words are. It's like 4 to 6, but let's just say 5. Split the difference. So, like, the longer the article, the more in depth it goes. And then there's a point at which it's just way too complex. Like, it's the kind of stuff that scientists read, and then it's just too much. But in that threshold's like 2,000 or 3,000 words. But if you can, if you want to kind of like quickly eliminate possibilities, look at word count, because there's just so many tiny little, 250 word, 40 word articles that are picked up by those library databases. They just are a huge waste of time in that respect. So you want to eliminate those right away. And that can be kind of a way of moving the process along. So how many sources do you need? Well, if you only have, if you just have 500 word articles, you're probably going to need 10 or 15. If you have 2,000 or 3,000 word articles, you might not need 5. So that's what you have to consider. Word count is really important in doing research because it helps you really weed out a lot of, in many cases, weak sources. So, Now what am I on here? Use signal phrases. Use signal phrases, please. Because in essay 4 or essay 3, no one used signal phrases. And as a comp instructor, no one, I shouldn't say that, but it was a common mistake when students used historical sources, whether it was history.com or just some encyclopedia, whatever, it didn't matter. There was no internal documentation. And so, and otherwise often very good papers too. That was the worst part about it. Like essay 3, the papers were very, very good, extremely good in terms of content. And they were kind of sloppy in other respects. And that was one of them. So we want to do better on that. Some of you are taking my English 122 class in the summer. And the more you understand MLA and can do it without a whole lot of trouble, the better off. Like 122 will be easier. Let me just put it that way. So that's not a thinly veiled threat. That's just an assurance that if you put time into it now, it'll be easier in the summer. So essay 4, you got to get it right because you're using it's going to be very obvious if you don't have the right sources. So very important to get signal phrases down. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about. So for my online classes, you just did this exercise a couple weeks ago. For my face-to-face classes, it's been a while, but we did the, yes, Soraya, they are just introducing the sources, but you're using the author's name or the title of the article. And I'm glad you asked that question because they would introduce the source. They also indicate when the paraphrase starts, and signal phrases are going to be used in summarizing, paraphrasing, and quoting. All 3 of those. Not responding because that's like your conclusion. That's your point of view. But the paraphrasing, the summarizing, and the quoting are not coming from you necessarily. They may be your words. They're not your ideas. Therefore, they should be internally and externally cited, which means you got to use a signal phrase. And I think too, you want to use signal phrases in research papers because it shows your instructor, look at this person that I'm quoting. They have a PhD. They're really smart. And what will often happen, like if you're really kind of careful about research and you spend some time looking at the source and evaluating the source, you'll find that you'll start to pick out sources, and your instructor, well, not instructor, you get into a 4-year program, it'll be your professor will be familiar with that person's work, and then they will kind of look at you and say, oh, you really get after it, don't you, when you do research. It's a way of in academia of showing that this person who is way more qualified than me agrees with me, so I must be pretty smart, or I must really be thinking about this. So that's what we're after. I think when you research, think about, are you going to paraphrase something? So are you going to put it in your words, but essentially keep it the same? And paraphrases are going to be long. Summaries are going to be a shortened version of what the author originally wrote. And then, of course, quotes are exactly the same thing. Which of the 3 are you going to use? And, there are times when we don't need to know all the details. That's when you summarize. There are times when we do, and that's when you paraphrase. And so you're going to have to use some judgment yourself. But one of the things that you think about is, how important is this piece of information to my point? That's how you make the decision. It's not any more complicated than that. You're looking at whatever supports your point of view. That's what you're going to use. And if it really supports your point of view, then you're probably going to paraphrase it. And if it doesn't really, it kind of supports your point of view, or you think it's a small part of your point of view, then you might want to just summarize it. And if you really, really think that it totally sums up your point of view, you quote it. It's really that simple. I mean, it's not that simple, but that's kind of a simple way to think about it. How about that? So you're going to use paraphrasing, summarizing, quoting, and responding. And a lot of you used it on essay 3. So it's not like you can't do it. And you probably used it some on the first 2 essays, but definitely essay 3. That was a big part of it, is figuring out what to summarize and what not to summarize and all that kind of stuff. So All right, so I got through my agenda. So do I have any questions about Essay 4 or anything in the class? While you're typing, I'm going to talk about what I sent out some emails to my online students. I don't know if any of them are logged in right now, but if you are, I sent out some emails about the last 4 weeks now, what needs to be done, and then also what can still be done before the end of the semester. And this is true of my face-to-face class too. I sort of make a big deal about due dates and stuff and getting things in on time, and then I totally, and this is all planned, but I take late work, and I do it every semester, and I usually will take it up to probably week 15. And I also, to remind all of you, in both face-to-face and online classes, I still take rewrites or revisions of essays. If you revise an essay, just resubmit it in the same Dropbox that it, like, so if you revise essay 2, just put it in the essay 2 final draft Dropbox. That's simple. And I'll get to those eventually. Most of them I've gotten to. I try to get to them sooner than later, but I have a lot of late essay 3s coming in. So today, I spent more time on that than I normally would. It's just that time of year. Things are getting turned in late. So any questions? Any questions? Okay. If you have questions, you know where to find me. I'm just double checking my list to make sure I cover everything. There probably will be another. I think I'm going to have to make another MLA video. It's going to be short, but I feel like I just have to reiterate the importance. Oh, hey, I got another question. All right. What should I do if I can't find enough sources on the LCC library? Should I make my topic wider or something? I'd have to know I've got to look at your topic. I think that's something we can just talk about tomorrow. The library database, if you can't find something in the library database, that's a pretty big pool. You're probably better off just using the internet in that case. I would, but before I give up the topic entirely or kind of abandon the topic, I would do some broader researching and I would work with someone. So that would be tomorrow. You and I can kind of talk about this. But I think you might find that it might just be search terms. Like search terms make a big difference in what you find. Yeah, we're still doing the essay resubmissions. Right. Yeah, definitely. I think actually one of the essays that people should revise is essay 3 if need be. Only because they were really close and they were like, they're pretty good, but they were really close to being ready. But they just, like, I didn't, not many people turned in brought a rough draft for me to look over. So it would be a good opportunity to take one more stab at it and get it just right. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to call it a day then. Let me know if you have any questions. Send me an email, whatever. There's probably going to be one more live stream before the end of the semester. And I guess that's about it. Have a good night, and I'll see some of you tomorrow.